A warm welcome to those attending and also our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Finance and Corporate Services Select Committee, and my name is Councillor John Riley and I'm the chairman of this meeting. A key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a wide range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be considered today is shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room and also accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. For those present in the room and intend to speak, please note that you will be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. For those in the public gallery, you will not be on camera. A reminder to the councillors, officers and those speaking today that you should turn the microphone button on when speaking. This will ensure you can be heard in the room and by those watching online. I'm going to ask the members and officers present to go around the table and introduce themselves, starting with Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. Mark Bradley, Democratic. Mark Bradley, Democratic. Councillor Stuart Mathers.
Councillor Narendra.
Councillor Raju Sansarpuri.
Councillor Peter Smallwood.
Councillor Kishan Bhatt. Councillor Wayne Bridges.
Thank you very much. Before we get started with the main agenda, some quick housekeeping matters. Fire alarm, we're not expecting a fire drill. So if the fire alarm does go off, please follow Mark to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting point, which is the Civic Centre forecourt. Mobile devices, for those in the room, please switch off any mobile devices before the meeting starts or put them in silent. Please note that some councillors may be using tablets or laptops to view the agenda. As far as feedback is concerned, you're welcome to give feedback about this meeting. Resident feedback forms are available in the room. There's also a version online under the broadcast. So we go to the agenda and item number 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies from Councillor Banerjee and Councillor Smallwood is kindly substituting.
You're very welcome to this meeting and thank you for coming. And Councillor Sansarpuri, I think on the last at the last council meeting you were put on this committee permanently, or at least permanently for as long as you're here. So welcome, and I hope you enjoy the meetings as we go forward.
Thank you.
All right, declarations of interest in matters coming before the meeting. Thank you. We've got all the usual ones recorded anyway. Minutes of the previous meeting. So this was on the 19th of October. And it was a fairly full meeting. We had the first aid awareness and training, health and safety services, which was a very interesting update prompted by a question from Councillor Bridges. And a lot of detail was gone into as far as that was concerned. And we can see from the minutes there the various issues that arose. Councillor Bridges, any additional matters to add or comments?
Nothing further than what's already stated in the minutes, Chairman. I think it was a very informative session.
Yep, thank you very much. I think it was. Right, so that was that one, which was very good. Then we had the explanation of Treasury management, which again I found very interesting and very fascinating, because very often these things are talked about, more especially by the Cabinet Member for Finance. But have a much better understanding of what that means was very helpful. And then we had, and we'll come back to this, an update on the new members' inquiry process. And I think the important word there is new, because it is still new, and expectations and usage and so forth must be viewed in the light of the fact that it is very, very new and has been brought in order to help everybody. Then we had the Council's consultation arrangements, which we're going to come back to, I think, when we come to the work programme. Again, which was interesting, an interesting presentation there from the officer who attended. She dealt with a lot of different aspects of how we engage with our various communities. Then we had another look at the, for the sort of penultimate time, at the procurement report, which we've got before us tonight for finalisation, and the usual other matters in the minutes. So any comments on the minutes from anybody? Nope. All right, thank you. Are they agreed? Agreed. Thank you, Mark. You can mark those as agreed. Right. So item number 5, which is our very large-scale review, which is the final review report, Procurement in Hillingdon, Securing Value for Our Residents. We spent a great deal of time on this and had a lot of sessions, all of which I think were really, really informative. And here we have the report with the recommendations that we looked at last time. So I think because we largely sort of looked at all this previously, unless anybody's got anything specific that they want to have included, for my own part, I think it's a very good report. And it fulfills what we said we wanted to do at the beginning, which was to make sure that our reports are relevant and focused and useful going forward. What we don't want to do, of course, is to create reports which are frightfully interesting but actually don't add to the way in which we move things forward. But I think this does, and it makes a lot of good points across its entirety. Comments?
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate the depth of this report. It's quite useful to have the context as well, which, when it comes to procurement, is often needed because of the complexities of it. There are 2 points on the same sort of theme, really. One is, in terms of environmental matters, I feel that we don't need to necessarily draw into the report the way in which carbon neutral by 2035 in procured services would be achieved in the fleet. So it talks about electric vehicles being preferable, but costs could be prohibitive. I'm not sure if that necessarily needs to be mentioned, so that it doesn't draw conclusions in the report that in the future towards that journey. That's on page 23, and that's a suggestion. It doesn't matter if you want to include it or not, in our opinion, but I just think it just gives a little bit extra that could sway thinking, and we know that that journey is constantly evolving. And my understanding, if I may then move on to page 27 on the practical recommendations of point 6, was that there would be, in the kind of procurement standing orders and expectations on large contracts, that there would be work that would start to work towards the transition with longer contracts towards kind of carbon net neutral. So I suppose the wording for me would be along the lines of that longer term procurement contracts begin to show the pathway towards transitioning to net zero. So it wasn't necessarily about requiring net zero, but that people in the procurement process would start to show their pathway towards, for the longer contract length, because we're 12 years away from that deadline. So if in the next 2 years or so, and if there are 10-year contracts issued or anything along those lines, if there isn't start seeing a pathway towards net zero shown, it could mean the council is unable to fulfil that obligation as much as it is financially able. So it was just my understanding from the last meeting is that there would be for the longer term contracts, not just a tweak in the way in which Cabinet would revisit them, but also that they would start to show evidence of their pathway towards, not necessarily the commitment of, but the pathway towards. I think it's a transitional thing as opposed to an absolute.
I think what we were trying to do there was to pitch it at a reasonably high level. I mean, inevitably, I think that progression will be probably something that's built in. But I think that trying to aim for a sort of high achievement might be the best way of starting it. I mean, I suppose we could have something along the lines of going towards expectation or something along those lines.
I mean, Chairman, it's committee decision. One suggestion could be under recommendation 4, that register, that headline register one of all the top level contracts, if you like. There's a section in there showing whether that contract has got a commitment to being carbon net zero by 2030 or 2035, actually, in this case of contracts. You can keep track of that as part of the register.
I'm seeing nods. Okay.
So you'd have like a, I don't know, a little green. This contract is carbon, meeting the carbon objectives of by 2035. A suggestion, or if the committee want to, you could amend recommendation 6, so you focus on. Councillor made this point initially around any new long-term contracts, because we're getting nearer to that deadline. Show the pathway, as he suggested, to becoming net zero by 2035, because if we have a 10-year contract now, you're just going to be a couple of years before that. And then you could then go into that other thing, which this references, which is about those contracts which just go over 10 years, and you just need to review to check their value for money.
Yeah, 6 was really more to do with our concern around long-term contracts not really being necessarily reviewed properly, and or at least whether they are reviewed properly or not, that there ought to be a built-in trigger for some form of review and approval. That's more what 6 was all about. I mean, we can add to it, or it may be better just to have an overall overlay that says that expectations with regard to getting towards, over a long period of time, the net zero aspirations should, generally speaking, be built in to our contracting and procurement in terms of a process, or in terms of a line of thought and discussion, something along those lines.
Sorry, Chairman. You're talking the longer term, so a new long-term contract like 5 or 10 year, because we're getting near that thing. So the main long-term contracts in the council are things like the highways, which are coming up, the street lighting, they're 5, 10 years, whatever. APCOA, the current park enforcement, that was a long-term contract. Those ones you're talking about where they might come up now soon for renewal, those in terms of time length, to look at a pathway within that going forward.
I don't want the council to set itself up to fail, is my thinking on this. So I'm not saying that if a vehicle has a lifespan of more than 12 years, that it needs to be carbon neutral on its 12th or 13th year because of that deadline. I understand that that's a capital purchase, but I think the council has policy that says that by 2035 all procured contracts and services, where I think it's practically possible, which includes a financial element, will be net carbon zero. And if we haven't, in this review with a 12-year lead, started to reference in our recommendations that in the longer contracts there starts to be some evidence of a pathway towards that, we're expecting that when those contracts expire, that a new contract, which in 2 years before the deadline would be effectively net carbon zero, which would be extremely unrealistic. So it's finding suitable wording that shows our commitment to residents to net carbon zero in procured services. There will be, no doubt, some contracts where it is not practically possible, but at least it's assessed at the procurement stage of a contract, not at the end of or during the management of a contract, because that's also not fair on the contractor if we change the goalposts mid-contract. And I'm sure the procurement team, along with other support with those who are working on the carbon zero agenda, are in the pipeline. But I think we as a committee should be setting the tone that says, please don't start to build this in now. Start to think of ways that for the longer term things that where we can show our continued commitment to avoiding the disaster of irreversible climate change, And it also says to our residents that this isn't something that's theoretical, but actually some small practical steps starting ahead of that deadline.
Well, why don't we have as a general comment at the beginning of the recommendations, where possible, the Council's aspirations for net carbon zero need to show a pathway of support for our intentions.
And if I may, Chair, just the wording in the motion was specifically done so that it gave the Council the opportunity to justify where it's not possible to do that, so that wording might also line up quite nicely to this earlier stage. I mean, we'd love to do everything tomorrow, but it needs some lead time. So I think, I can't remember this, I think it was where practically possible, but it's worth checking that motion because that gives the parameters in which the policy was set.
Well, if the committee's happy, you've given a short preamble there. I could then include the council motion as a reference thing in the report, so that's clear, because that relates to procurement, clearly. Because there was a second council motion which was approved, which amended the original climate declaration to...
That one where it says...
Yeah.
Where practically
Very possible. So I put that in, and then it's up to the committee, but one suggestion could be, it might not be able to be done immediately, but that tracker, if you like, that is recommendation 4, you know, showing where that contract is going to achieve or will meet the council's carbon commitments by 2035, having a tracker so you can see these contracts. Eventually, once you get nearer that date, if the tracker's still working, they should all be lighting up green, if you get my drift. So I don't know whether that's something you want to consider, just adding as a headline tracker in the register. But whether it's possible or not at this stage, it might not be. But as we move forward, it might be more so.
Any other comments? I think that some form of a reference to that, yeah, okay, in that way that we've just discussed, to give those two different ways of looking at it, both the fact that we're kind of giving it a nudge from the start, and also acknowledging that, you know, not every single nature of contract is going to be able to achieve the end result at the time that we've said, inevitably, because of the nature of the different contracts. So something along the lines of that as a starting point, as a general comment across the recommendations. What I don't want to do is to lose the effect of the recommendations in terms of, because we were very concerned, weren't we, about making sure that there was good control and knowledge about the contracts by committee chairs, by cabinet members, by senior officers, and also to build in that notional review, that notion of review, in terms of very long-term contracts and the rollovers, because you often get, you know, cabinet papers, or we're just going to roll it over because we haven't had time, sort of thing, and I want to get away from that. All right, good, okay.
Chairman, can I just confirm, in the background to review section, which is like the introduction, I can reference the council motion on this, and that your comments around pathway, you know, in terms of the path, showing pathways going forward. And then what about that recommendation for, Chairman, did you want to adapt that to include a tracking of whether the contracts are carbon, will be carbon
well, I think
zero?
I think
leave it.
I mean, I'm happy to take comments, but I think that emphasises. I think that really emphasises the. See, 4 is quite detailed in terms of a recommendation. It's not massively punchy, but it has to be what it is, because what we're really saying is that we're recommending that those who need to see a easy to identify list of contracts in their portfolios and so forth in their departments have it, and that they get the chance to review the timelines of contracts. So I think really the initial comment applies to everything, and we don't need to go to each individual recommendation necessarily. Everybody happy with that? Yep. Okay.
And Chairman, just if you're happy, I can just delegate to myself to liaise with you and Labour League just to
Yeah.
finalise that final wording.
All right.
But,
The other thing that we thought about was that two things really. One, I'd heard that at least one, it may be more, companies outside of the geography of the borough have chosen to set up subcontract or additional satellite companies in the borough because they are keen on the way in which we're doing procurement and keen on the way in which we're moving in terms of procurement. So they're bringing, so there's a, I think there was a company in Kent, fairly large company, which has established a satellite company in the borough, so they're on hand. And I think that's a very positive move and helps the borough itself. So I think as a general proposition somewhere, we can mention that maybe towards the end or in a sort of concluding paragraph, that we're aware of companies making that move and coming into the borough, which we very much welcome. And then, in addition to that, a final sentence or two about the fact that although this procurement review was very specific and that's what we've done, there are a number of other services across the council which help businesses, and that this plays very much into that general overall business offer that we make to different sizes of business, be it very large multinationals or very local. Something along those lines. Everyone happy with that? Okay, super. Right, any more comments? Other than that, we've done it, which is a great achievement. Well done, everybody. And again, as I say, I don't know about anybody else, but I think we learned a heck of a lot from all those incredible meetings. And I really, when we do our presentation to Cabinet, I would like your agreement to really, I know we always say thank you to the officers, but to big up Matthew, because the work he's done on this has been absolutely extraordinary, and he's given up lots of different evenings and has done loads of work on it, not just for the committee but also outside as well. Okay, good. Thank you. Right, next. So that's the final attention to that. Then we've got item number 6. Mark.
this is just a quick follow-up from some of the information requests you asked for from the last meeting. Just quickly take you through them, because one has to bear in mind you have moved from an old ME system to a new members inquiry and service request system. So this is just about the data that's coming in. The first table and chart shows the number of members inquiries just by the directorate, so you can get a rough idea over the last 5 years. The second page is broken down by some of the services within that, and then the top services, if you like. And then the lower down, where you've got members' inquiries 27th of November to November just gone now, or this month, that is through the new system. So you can see some of the other ones, and you can see the comment about this other services, which they're going to try and bottom out and better categorise so we can get a better understanding of the type of inquiries that are submitted. Then on the right, that big long table, that's service requests, which is obviously different to members' inquiries, and you can see the top ones there are, well, top one is members fly tipping, potholes, rubbish accumulation, signage, street cleaning, and tree maintenance. But you can see there's a broad range of things that members are putting in service requests on. And then there's the final comment around, I think there's somewhere in here, there was, well, actually I don't think it's in here, Councillor, I think you asked about the duplication thing, and I understand that that isn't feasible at this current time, so if you're happy I can send you a response on that. But that was checked with officers, and they weren't able to do that within the current system, that's the GOS system that's being used.
All right. On this long list, page 33, I'm not sure members fly tipping is quite the accurate way of describing it, but there we go. But we can see the various items which are most frequently made reference to. I must confess, I'm not entirely sure why this is seen to be a problem, because a lot of these things will come up, and I take your point about duplication. I think you're right about that. I think, 3 members in a ward might not necessarily all be going out together, but they might see the same thing at different times and put it all in. And that may distort the picture. I don't know. But I do think that some of these things are fairly repetitive, in as much as they will be spotted repeatedly. It may not be the same thing, but it's the same type of thing. And certainly, I've noticed with regard to road surfaces and potholes and stuff like that, even when we've done it, sometimes the problem reoccurs at some point in the future because of maybe weather or the nature of the materials we're using or whatever. So it might ask further questions about the actual event as opposed to just spotting it. But I may be wrong about this, but I think that high numbers of service requests in various categories really show that members are doing what they're supposed to do, doesn't it? Councillor Smallwood.
Thanks, Chair. Just 2 observations. To hazard a guess, I'm going to guess other services is where members have maybe been adapting to the new system and may have used the ME process where they possibly should have used a service request. I'm very diligent in making sure that I check whether it's a service request or ME, but I'm assuming high other services will probably be where there is, and whether there's something around educating members or potentially going to a member. It probably should have gone into the service request, but obviously we'll get it sorted. The only other thing I just wanted to say is if a resident was looking at this, the graphs on the first 2 pages, I just think we need to make it clear that comparable numbers of 2018-2009 are not comparable to 22-23 because we're 13 councillors down when we had the reorganisation from the local government boundary association for numbers. So we can't compare when we had 65 councillors to when we had 53, and I just think the papers or any future papers should just recognise that important point because they're not comparable. You'd expect it to go down because there's less of us.
It's a good point. Councillor Bridges.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd share Councillor Smallwood's concerns in regards to the other services. It's quite a high number. I do note in the report that the officers are taking action to reduce that, and I would be interested to know what exactly is causing that to fall under that category, whether it is indeed, as Councillor Small said, members not allocating it to the correct item, but also consequently what issues does that have with things like freedom of information requests where officers are expected to dig into members' inquiries and casework. Is this going to be causing a problem for them in terms of digging down into details and trying to identify the correct inquiry for the relevant department? On the bottom of page 32 with that table, if you look at line 14, it says blank and there's 38. I would be interested to know what that blank refers to. I did a sort of comparison to my own members' inquiry system, and I did note that tenancy management is not listed on that chart, so I suspect that may be the topic that the blank refers to, but if you can have some clarity on that, that would be appreciated.
That shouldn't be too hard to get hold of. Councillor Smallwood.
Just also on waste, I just wonder if we're using the system properly, what 559 waste members' inquiries there would be. I'm trying to think off the top of my head what you'd report as a members' inquiry for waste. I'm guessing if there was long-term negligence of bin people not collecting something, there's not many issues that would probably be, if we're using it properly, where waste would be that high. And I just wonder, again, whether there is, this is new, this isn't a catchy game, whether things are being put down the wrong avenue of members' inquiries or things. It'd be interesting to know what's within that 559 of waste as well, if you're going to review this in the future, because I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, other than some very nuanced stuff, what a waste ME would look like if we're using the system properly.
No, good point. Councillor Bridges.
just purely speculation. I would imagine it's probably around the collection dates where bags are being left out before and they've split or they've not been collected after that. And a lot of it's probably around the collection dates themselves. I would imagine that why that figure's so high.
To suggest that having looked at what it means and what they are, that it's termed something different, or it is differently termed, I should say. It may be worth, once we've seen what it is, to think about whether there's a better description. Because it doesn't have to, I mean, waste could be all sorts of things. It could be, bless you, it could be litter, or it could be, you know, foxes eating bags or whatever. So it seems to possibly cover a multitude of sins, but actually not really. So I think the idea that we find out what that is, and we can dig down into the actual meaning. I don't suppose Ian would take terribly long to be able to tell us that, and then go from there. Oh, sorry, Carl.
Yeah, so just going back to page 31, as Councillor Smallwood said, that the numbers of cases have gone down, members' inquiries have gone down, but it's quite worrying, really. If you look at the value, if you look at the figures for example, adult services, as a proportion of the number of member inquiries, it's at its highest. So I wondered if we maybe want to see what is causing that to go up. So if, in fact, all of them, including children's services, finance, they're all as a proportion of the number of members' inquiries. So although the members' inquiries have gone down, if you look at them as a percentage, the cases are much higher than even in COVID. So I just wondered if we wanted to look at what may be causing that, or look into why they're so high.
We could. Obviously, this item is a response to stuff we've asked for and asked about before. And I think you're right that every time we get information about this, we always come up with something in addition. I wonder if it might be an idea, unless Mark's recaptured it all, for any of us, all of us, to look at these figures and then email Mark with questions based on what they show, so that he can then pass them on to Ian, and then we can get a further update based on our questions. I think that might be helpful, because you're right about that. I mean, there might be all sorts of reasons. I mean, it may be that, you know, relatively newer councillors have sort of got into their stride and are picking stuff up. It may be that people are taking particular interest in particular aspects. I don't know. The adult services one is interesting. But yeah, I think it would be a good idea for us to email Mark with questions around these figures, and then he can have a get together with Ian and get us some answers. Yeah. But I quite like the idea of working out what waste means and whether it really is waste as opposed to a variety of other options and the blank issue. Yeah.
Just another observation, especially on the service request. I think just cleaning up some of the names of things would be quite a thing. I think, Chair, you said members fly tipping. I mean, according to this, each and every member has averagely fly tipped 22 times, I think. So that's not happening. I just think something, dog bins as well. I mean, I'm surprised there's only one against dog bins. I certainly know that I've reported more than one dog bin not being collected or needing replacing. That's obviously being put in somewhere else. So I just think some of the namings of these could be cleared up. Because some residents actually do look at this and find this interesting, and go into quite levels of detail. So I just think cleaning some of that up. You know, what does noise mean? I'm shocked noise is a service request. You think noise would possibly be a member's inquiry, right? So I'm just, or antisocial behaviour, as my colleague Councillor Bridges says. Just interested to see street name plates. You know, I definitely know I've reported multiple street name plates for Ruislip, well, probably more than 21. I can't believe I'm the only councillor on the council reporting street name plates, right? I might be, but it's highly unlikely. So I just, some of this could do with a little bit of clearing up the names and why some of the things are there or not there. Thank you, Chair.
I think this plays into the newness of this. as well, because I mean things like, I mean you're right, I agree with that. But I mean some of these are obvious, you know, abandoned cycle, well you can tell what that is. Abandoned vehicles, yes, but what cars for sale? I mean 3. I don't understand what that is and why it's a problem and why it needs reporting. If someone's got a car, I mean I know, you know, not far from where I am, there's a chap who'll have a car or two every now and again, and he'll put a sign in the window. Well, it's not antisocial or anything. It's just happening. So I don't know whether it's that or what it means. You know, clinical waste. That's a clear and obvious thing, but it's only one. So I think maybe as part of the ongoing, dog bins, absolutely one. That's crazy. I think as part of the ongoing review or consideration of all these things, the description and names of the case types, unless they've taken this from how it's been described, but it must be the drop-down list that's identified, isn't it? Yeah. All right. So maybe I mean, you know, tree maintenance, that's pretty obvious and it's very high and it always will be. But yeah, okay. No, it's a good point. Okay. Councillor Mathers.
Thank you very much. This is helpful to a degree. Obviously, we're guessing a little bit as to why what things are up and things are down. And I think the main point of getting a sense of these figures was to start to understand the journey of how members were reporting things and in what areas over the last 5 years. So it would be useful to get a little bit of the methodology as to how officers are data cleansing or changing, or what parts of this they want to explore with the report, just to understand, you know, actually we are looking at other service requests. We're looking at whether it's because of the user not applying it as they would hope, or whether the system is not allowing it to be inputted in a certain way. Because I suggest that with members' inquiries there might be regular topics that people are putting in that is another, rather than having its specific name. So in time there will be a specific name for that. But it would be useful to get an understanding of how officers are data cleansing. I'm also quite aware that my preference would be is that the team is able to spend time, well, in my mind, this is as I will say again, a system not fit for purpose, but at least improving the user experience rather than us getting them to over-analyse some of the data. And I think it's difficult to interpret just numbers, and there is definitely some work to do, but my preference would still be to see a system that is effective for the user, for both residents and ourselves, rather than necessarily fully understanding some of these. But I do appreciate the officers have put a lot of time in, continue to put a lot of time in to really investigating what's what on the system.
All right, thanks. The usability and the way the system is being used is something that either we or Councillor Bridges' committee will, or both, will get to have a look at later on. There is quite a bit about the relative newness of the system and its use in terms of how it's going. But having a fairly good delve into usability and ease of usability is something that we've got in mind for later. All right, good. Any other comments? Okay, so if you'd all like to email Mark with any comments or observations that he can carry on to Ian, that'd be very good. Good. All right. Next item 7. Yeah, which is the forward plan.
Thank you, Chairman. We'll be publishing the December, probably January as well, forward plan relatively soon, once that's cleared. So there's some items listed here for December Cabinet. I expect one or two of these to maybe move to later Cabinet meetings to be confirmed, so the contractual ones potentially. But you can see the items under your remit. The big one being the budget, obviously, which will come to you in January to comment on as well.
Yeah. Well, that's the sort of the big ticket item is the budget for us later on. All right, any comments about the forward plan? Thank you. And finally, the work programme. Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. So, we were planning to kick off the mini consultation review after the council motion at this meeting, but due to officer commitments, unable to. So we'll schedule that on for the January meeting, so we can have a witness session. You've already given me some information you'd like to be included in that report, and we can flesh it out. So I've got that. If there's anything else you want me to get in terms of information or data on consultation, just let me know, so I can feed that to the officer preparing the report. So that's January, and obviously January we will be busy with the budget. Not mid-year budget, let's not take that one out, but there will be the budget proposals. And then for the Chairman might want to say something about members' inquiries and the digital journey. I've scheduled on for the February meeting, if feasible, the senior officer to attend in respect of outlining the council's digital journey, which could be a potential next review topic, which I think you were quite keen to, you agreed to take forward at the last meeting.
Yeah.
And then to not lose track, I have had a conversation with the Chief Executive around trying to get members a high-level overview of some of the transformation work that's going on, and I think he's taken that away as something to discuss, which is positive. So if there's something that can be prepared before that, great. If not, I've scheduled something on to keep the, if you like, the pressure on from the committee to march Cabinet on transformation. I also suggest, not to lose sight, the committee keep track of that. Its predecessor committee, chaired by Councillor Richard Mills, they review into performance monitoring, the KPIs that are so important for all select committees to be able to track and monitor performance of council services, and we are waiting for that new regime to come in, which then will flow down nicely and neatly to the select committee, so you can see headline details of all the KPIs of services, how the trends, how they're performing, ask questions, and do your important scrutiny role in terms of monitoring the performance of council services, which is lacking at the moment. So I'm keeping that on track there for that.
Yeah, that's an important one, but it's a pretty full programme, which is good. I mean, one thing we won't have to do is to worry about the children's services, which just been marked excellent by Ofsted, and I think we should congratulate our colleagues in children's services on that. So good. All right. Anything further on the work programme? Councillor Mathers?
I noticed that one of the areas that we oversee but haven't heard as much from is communications, and I wondered if it would be useful to get an information item for both the internal and external communications, whether it be the strategy or just generally how the team approaches. I know consultation is one aspect of maybe communications, but I'm thinking just more the corporate comms. You know, we've got Twitter accounts, websites, emails that go out regularly from the leader or from, and internally we have one from the CEO. So it'd be useful to get an overview of the different types and I suppose where the focus is, as there are so many different channels of the corporate communications team.
Yeah, it's certainly something we can ask about. It may be a single meeting review like the consultation. The consultation, of course, came about as a consequence of issues raised in council about the extent to which we're able to and effectively able to reach out to all sorts of different communities, and how we consult with communities perhaps that aren't used to being consulted with or don't engage hugely or want to engage but don't know how to, and all that sort of stuff. So that's quite. I think that was quite a useful session last time, and to carry that forward to get a much better understanding, and also to be as quick as we can on that because it was raised in council. So if we can come up with some, and I think when we spoke to the officer last time, we were quite keen on hearing some fairly radical proposals in terms of how we aim to better engage, because I suspect there's a whole group of methods by which we engage, and they're tried and tested, but they may not be as effective for everybody as they are for maybe even the vast majority, but they don't cover everybody. That's the problem. All right, good. Good. Any other issues on work programme? My goodness, that must be the quickest meeting we've ever had. All right, well, in that case, I will thank you all very much and close the meeting.